a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today and all of your important work that you have put into writing the Twitter files. Thank you for your willingness to come here and be subjected to the kind of abuse that we've observed when all you're trying to do is talk about the importance of the First Amendment and why the federal government should not be doing what they did and what has been evidenced in the Twitter files. I often say that sunshine is the best disinfectant, and boy, after listening to you and reading the reports that I have, does our federal government need to be fumigated. Mr. Taibbi, I'd like to focus on Twitter Files Part 9, Twitter and other government agencies, as I think a lot of the evidence you present in this section touches on the major takeaways that are so important for Americans to understand about the seriousness of what was found in the Twitter files. In your testimony describing the cooperation between the federal government and tech companies like Twitter, you stated, quote, "A focus of this growing network is making lists of people whose opinions, beliefs, associations, or sympathies are deemed to be misinformation, disinformation, or malinformation," end quote. What's interesting to me is that what is missing from that list is the word unlawful.
That's true, yes.
And so it notably seems to be missing from the FBI's lexicon. In Part 9 of the Twitter files, Mr. Taibbi notes that the main conduit sending requests to Twitter would routinely label these flags as violations of Twitter's terms of service. Even Jim Baker, a Twitter employee at the time and someone who is allegedly a former general counsel of the FBI, stated, quote, "but also odd that they are searching for violations of our policies." Mr. Taibbi, what was the approximate percentage of the FBI requests to Twitter being based on the justification that the tweet violated the company's terms of service?
Ms. Congressman, I would say that that was a standard disclosure or a standard disclaimer in almost all the communications from the FBI to Twitter. There would usually be a line in there saying something like, "For your consideration, we believe the following 207 accounts may have violated your terms of service." But notably, they very rarely focused on words like truth or inaccuracy. Very often, they used the words malinformation, misinformation, or disinformation. And so I think they were trying to shift the focus from one idea to the other.
Okay, I think that's interesting as well. What do you make of the finding that the FBI found it its responsibility to police violation of a private company's terms of service as a priority over policing violations of U.S. federal law?
There were a couple of very telling emails that we published. One was by a lawyer named Sasha Cardile, where the company was being so overwhelmed by requests from the FBI, and in fact, they gave each other a sort of digital high five after one batch, saying that was a monumental undertaking to clear all of these. But she noted that she believed that the FBI was essentially doing word searches keyed to Twitter's terms of service, looking for violations of terms of service, specifically so that they could make recommendations along those lines, which we found interesting.
Do you believe it's the FBI's responsibility to police the terms of service for a private company?
I do not. I think you cannot have a state-sponsored anti-disinformation effort and also without directly striking at the whole concept of free speech. I think the two ideas are in direct conflict. And this is a fundamental misunderstanding, I think, of a lot of the people who get into this world. Some of them, I believe, in a well-meaning way. I think they're actually trying to accomplish something positive, but they don't understand what free speech means and what happens when you do this. It undermines the whole concept that truth doesn't come from, isn't mandated, that we arrive at it through debate and discussion.
Well, in fact, wouldn't you agree with me that the First Amendment is broader than Twitter's terms of service?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
And wouldn't you also agree with me that the FBI is responsible for complying with the First Amendment, not Twitter's terms of service?
I would hope so, yes. Yeah.
You also highlighted the presence of people like Jim Baker at Twitter. And again, I've noted that he is allegedly a former FBI employee. Part 9 also speaks of former other government association employees working at Twitter. What was the extent to which you found former FBI or other intelligence community employees working at Twitter? And did you find it odd?
There was a significant quantity of people who had come from the intelligence world or who had worked at state agencies. In fact, that was a very common method by which members of people who are currently working in government would reach out to Twitter. For instance, we found an email by a current State Department official who reached out to a former State Department official asking that 14 ordinary Americans have their accounts deleted. That was in a recent Twitter Files release. So yes, there's an extraordinary number of these people. A lot of them come from the intelligence world, which we did find unusual, I think.
Okay, thank you very much, and I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. I thank her. The gentleman from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I still try to figure out where all of this is going to go. But we've heard a lot from our Republican colleagues claiming that somehow all of this interaction has led to Twitter censoring conservative voices. And I really want to look at what the evidence is that that has or has not happened. In 2020, Twitter commissioned an objective study to examine whether its algorithms disproportionately promotes conservative or liberal voices. This was a massive study by researchers from the University of Cambridge and Berkeley. The analysis examined millions of Twitter accounts and 6.2 million news articles that were shared within the United States. The study results were quite clear. Twitter's algorithms actually amplifies conservative voices far more than liberal voices. So whatever comes of this question about pressure from the federal government, at least up until 2020, it didn't have an effect. A separate study, this one from the Indiana University, found that partisan accounts, especially conservative accounts, tend to receive more followers and follow more automated accounts. So, Mr. Taibbi and Mr. Schallenberger, are you familiar with these studies?
I am.
I am.
Very good. Then you know that whatever you may be trying to tell us, the effect on Twitter didn't happen.
No, I don't agree.
Excuse me, it's my time, thank you. I can also give you many real analytical studies based on actual evidence, but since I have only 5 minutes, Mr. Chairman, if I might enter into the record these studies of what actually is going on at Twitter with regard to censorship or not censorship. Mr. Chairman, may I enter those into the file? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I take that silence as a yes.
Did you identify the document? I'm sorry.
Certainly. These documents, studies that were done by universities and
we usually take a little bit, it takes a little bit more for unanimous consent than these documents, but without objection, we'll accept them into the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These studies found that to the extent that far-right accounts are being suspended, it's not because of their ideology, but because they are spreading conspiracy theories like QAnon. You can see those up on the board. Talk about nonsense. QAnons, are you really ready for these dots? Where in the country is gone? The rest of the world will go. Q is real. On and on. They're up there, and they're now part of the file also. This type of speech that perhaps our Republican colleagues believe social media platforms, all of whom, by the way, are private companies, not government, are somehow obligated to post. No matter how crazy, how offensive a post might be, these private companies presumably must advance the lies, conspiracy theories, personal attacks promoted by radicals. Now, I'm pretty sure that if the Democrats held a hearing today to force Fox News to post certain content, my Republican colleagues would be up in arms. And this is particularly ironic because we know for a fact that Fox News does spread disinformation and does so while knowing that the material is false. We've learned from the Dominion lawsuit that Fox hosts lied about the 2020 election. Its executives knew they were lying, and yet they were allowed to continue peddling their lies. Now, here's a reporter speaking to this issue, a Fox News reporter. He said, dangerously insane. There's two Fox executives describing Fox's decision to push forward election lies as chasing the nuts off the cliff. There are two other quotes, two other tweets that I think we ought to be aware of. And Fox News was promoting it. They were promoting Trump's lies. Quote up there, big protest in D.C. on January 6th. Be there, will be wild. A call to arms, and all of us in this building know the result of that call. A second one, Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what needed to be done to protect our country. This is the speech that my Republican colleagues would have us to believe is being wrongly, quote unquote, censored by social media companies. It's offensive, it's absurd. No private company has an obligation to amplify anything, and especially not messages that strike at the heart of our democracy. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Utah is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, witnesses, for being here. I suppose this is maybe a little bit outside your comfort zone. You didn't find yourself with this kind of attention when you began this endeavor, but I appreciate the courage and the commitment you've made to doing that. We may not agree on a lot of things when it comes to policy and politics, but I think we agree on our concern regarding the topic today. And I'll actually follow on from my Democratic friend and colleague and the things that he has said, because I agree with him. Private companies, I mean, Twitter, Facebook, they can ban whoever they want. They can mute. They can deplatform. They can set up whatever policy they want, and they have the ability to do that. I don't care about that. I agree with that. They should have that authority. The thing that we're concerned about is when the federal government, by proxy, essentially contracts this out. Because the federal government can't ban speech. They can define time and place, but they cannot ban content. And anyone would be foolish to think that when the FBI comes to a private company and highlights speech and then would expect them to do nothing. Of course they would respond to that. The FBI knew they would respond to that. The FBI expected them to respond to that. And I could use a couple analogies if I could, and they sound dramatic, but they're exactly right. It's illegal for the United States to assassinate a foreign leader. It would be illegal for the United States to pay $3.2 million to someone to go assassinate a foreign leader. It's illegal in some cases for the United States, or not illegal, but we would have to have a policy debate whether we would invade another country. It would be illegal for the United States to pay a private company like the Wagner Group in Russia to go and fight their battles for them. And that's exactly what the FBI did here. They said, well, we can't do this ourselves. We'll contract it out. We'll launder this effort through another company. And I would just ask you to respond to that. Do you think I'm overly dramatic, or do you think I'm wrong in my characterization of what we see here?
I don't. I think that's absolutely correct. Freedom of speech is the foundation for our democracy, and what we've seen here is federal government putting extraordinary amounts of pressure both on Twitter and Facebook. And we haven't talked about Facebook, but we now know that we have the White House demanding that Facebook take down factual information, and Facebook doing that. And with Matt's thread this morning, we saw the government contractors demanding the same thing of Twitter. Accurate information, they said, that needed to be taken down in order to advance a narrative.
And I have to interrupt just to agree with you. For heaven's sakes, again, we've heard over here, well, they got to Fox News lies. There's a reason that 20% of the people trust media. Oh my gosh, if you want to have a conversation about lies and deception in the media, I would love to engage in that. Because we've seen plenty of it over the last 6 years, and it's not coming from just Fox News. New York Times, CBS, NBC, every single one of them were saying things that they knew was not true. And they didn't say it once, they said it for years. And the White House, again, trying to stifle things that they know is true, but it doesn't fit their narrative. And I got to give one illustration in the few minute I have left. When you have an agent, Mr. Chan, who goes to his Twitter and says, please see below list of Twitter accounts which we believe violate your terms of service. I mean, how do you respond to that and defend that? Yeah, FBI should be looking at other private companies' policies and then highlighting, hey, these people might be violating your policies. Either one of you, Mr. Taibbi.
If I could, yeah, no, I think thank you, Mr. Congressman, and there's an important point. You know, in conjunction with our own research, there's a foundation, the Foundation for Freedom Online, which, you know, there's a very telling video that they uncovered where the director of Stanford's Election Integrity Partnership talks about how CISA, the DHS agency, didn't have the capability to do election monitoring, and so that they kind of stepped in to quote, fill the gaps legally before that capability could be amped up. And what we see in the Twitter files is that Twitter executives did not distinguish between DHS or CISA and this group EIP. For instance, we would see a communication that said, from CISA escalated by EIP. So they were essentially identical in the eyes of the company. EIP, by its own data, and this is in reference to what you brought up, Mr. Congressman, according to their own data, they significantly targeted more what they call disinformation on the right than on the left by a factor, I think, of about 10 to 1. So, and I say that as not a Republican at all. It's just a fact of what we're looking at. So yes, we have come to the realization that this bright line that we imagine that exists between, say, the FBI or the DHS or the GEC and these private companies is illusory, and that what's more important is this constellation of kind of quasi-private organizations that do this work.
Well, and we're over time, so I'll conclude with reemphasizing this. By a factor of 10 to 1, they tried to mute conservative thought. And the federal government cannot contract out suppression of free expression. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman's time has expired. The gentlelady from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I did that last time. I apologize, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Taibbi, I want to follow up a little bit on the ranking member's questions. When was the first time that Mr. Musk approached you about writing the Twitter files?
Again, Congresswoman, that would...
I just need a date, sir.
But I can't give it to you, unfortunately, because this is a question of sourcing, and I don't give up. I'm a journalist. I don't reveal my sources.
It's a question of chronology.
No, that's a question of sourcing.
Because you earlier said that someone had sent you through the internet some message about whether or not you would be interested in some information.
Yes, and I referred to that person as a source.
So you're not going to tell us when Musk first approached you?
Again, Congressman, when
So
you're
you
asking me
have to say yes or
you're
no.
asking a journalist to reveal a source.
So then you consider Mr. Musk to be the direct source of all this?
No, now you're trying to get me to say that he is the source. I just can't answer your question.
Well, it either is or he isn't. If you're telling me you can't answer because it's your source, well, then the only logical conclusion is that he is, in fact, your source.
Well, you're free to conclude that.
Well, sir, I just don't understand. You can't have it both ways, but let's move on because
No, he can. He's a journalist.
No, he can't, because either Musk is the source and he can't talk about it, or Musk is not the source. And if Musk is not the source, then he can discuss
No one
his
has yielded. The gentlelady's out of order. You don't get
and
to
she's
speak.
out of
every
order
time.
Gentlelady is
because
not
he's
recognized. The
interrupted.
gentlelady is not
Mr. Chairman,
recognized.
You're not recognized,
my
Mr.
time.
He has
Chairman.
not said that.
I don't.
What he has
talking
said is
about
he's
his-
not going to reveal his source, and the
I
fact
did
that
not yield
Democrats
my
are
time
pressuring
to
him
the
to do
chairman
so
or
is
the
such a
We're not.
violation
We're
of
asking
First
him about
Amendment.
his
My time
conversations
back.
with
The
Musk.
Gentlelady has not yielded you time. You don't
I
get
have
to
not
just talk
yielded
over
time
her.
to anybody. I want to reclaim my time, and I would ask the chairman to give me back some of the time because of the interruption. Mr. Chairman, I am asking you if you will give me the seconds that I lost.
We will give you that 10 seconds.
Thank you. Now, let's talk about another item that when you responded to the ranking member. You said that you had free license to look at everything, but yet you yourself posted on your I guess it's kind of like a web page. I don't quite understand what Substack is, but that what I can say is that in exchange for the opportunity to cover a unique and explosive story, I had to agree to certain conditions. What were those conditions? She asked you that question, and you said you had none, but you yourself posted that you had conditions.
No, the conditions, as I've explained multiple times.
No, sir, you've not explained. You told her in response to her question that you had no conditions. In fact, you kind of used the word license, that you were free to look at all of them, all 100,000 emails.
The question was posed, was I free to write about?
Sir, did you have any conditions?
The condition was that we published on
Sir,
Twitter.
did you have any conditions, yes or no? A simple question.
Yes.
All right, could you tell us what conditions those were?
The conditions were an attribution, sources at Twitter, and that we break any news on Twitter.
But you didn't break it on Twitter. Did you send the file that you released today to Twitter first?
Did I send the?
Sir,
actually, I did.
you
Yes.
today.
Yeah.
Did you send it to Twitter first?
The Twitter
That was
files
one of the
thread?
conditions? Yes or no, sir?
The Twitter files thread actually did come out first.
But, sir, you said earlier that you had to attribute all the sources to Twitter first. What you released today, did you send that to Twitter first?
No. I posted it on Twitter.
First, sir. Or did you give it to the ranking member, to the chairman of the committee or the staff of the committee first?
Well, that's not breaking the story. That's giving. Yes, I did give.
So you gave all the information that you did not give to the Democrats. You gave it to the Republicans first. Then you put it on Twitter?
Actually, no. The chronology is a little bit confused.
Well, then
It's more or
tell
less
us
the
what the
same
chronology was.
time. I believe the thread came out first
Where?
on Twitter.
On Twitter. So then you afterwards gave it to the Republicans and not the Democrats.
Yes, because I'm submitting it for the record as my statement.
Did you give it to them in advance?
I gave it to them today.
You gave it to them today, but you still have not given anything to the Democrats. Well, I'll move on, and I wanted to ask Mr. Schellenberger the same question, sir. When did you first visit with or get contacted by Mr. Musk?
I'm not going to reveal my sources, but like I said, I was invited by Barry Weiss.
I'm not asking for sources, sir. I'm just asking for chronology. When did you first make contact with Mr. Musk?
I don't know the exact date.
Was it?
It was December.
2020?
It was December.
December of, well, there's a lot of Decembers in history.
December of
sir.
last year.
Which December?
December of last year, ma'am.
Last year, the 22?
Yes.
All right. Now, in your discussion, in your answer, you also said that you were invited by a friend, Barry Weiss.
My friend Barry Weiss.
So this friend works for Twitter, or what is her?
She's a journalist.
Sir, I didn't ask you a question. I'm now asking Mr. Schellenberger a question. Please
Yes,
do
ma'am.
not
Barry Weiss is
interrupt.
a journalist.
I'm sorry, sir.
She's a journalist.
She's a journalist. So you work in concert with her?
Yeah.
Do you know when she first was contacted by Mr. Musk?
I don't know.
You don't know. So you're in this as a threesome?
There was many more people involved than that.
There was many more people involved with that. Are you being paid to be here today, either through consulting fees,
No.
campaign contribution
Absolutely
to your next
not.
run?
Gentlelady's
Absolutely
time
You have an interview scheduled after this hearing?
expired.
Absolutely not.
Gentlelady's
Absolutely.
time has
Thank you.
expired.
Thank you.
I don't know what to say other than I recognize the gentleman from North Dakota for 5